Hey, what's up everybody and welcome back to the channel. And you know, the PlayStation 5 has now been out for 2 years. 2 years. Yeah, it's crazy, really. But what's even crazier is that they've put a really stellar library of games together so far. One of my complaints last generation, or at least early on with the PlayStation 4, was that I personally felt that it got off to a little bit of a slow start. I mean, it ended absolutely fantastic, but a little slow to start off. But that's really not the case at all with the PlayStation 5 this generation. They've really had a consistent flow of good games, including multi-platform blockbusters and just a load of exclusives as well. So what we're going to do today is that we're going to take a look at the top 20 best PlayStation 5 games available as of right now. Now, I did give myself some stipulations for this video, though. The games on this list will be games that's released this generation, and I'm not going to include enhanced remasters that originally released on the PlayStation 4. That means I'm not going to include games like Uncharted Lost Legacy, games like Final Fantasy VII Remake, Ghost of Tsushima Director's Cut, Death Stranding Director's Cut, and games like that. Now, with that said, all of those games are absolutely excellent, and they look stunning on the PlayStation 5, by the way, so I do highly recommend those games because they're actually some of my own personal favorites. I'm just not including them for list purposes. That's pretty much all here. That way I can just mostly focus on newer games that's released within the last 2 years. With that said, though, I mean, yeah, let's just go ahead and get right into it. So to start off this list, I have Stray, which is unexpectedly a good game based around being a cat in a sci-fi world. It's not something that I would have ever thought about, but I mean, you can meow, you can knock things over, be a little jerk, but cute and loving at the same time. You know, do all the feline-like things that your heart desires. What's not to love about that? But it's actually about more than just being a cat. There's an actual good game here. This is a puzzle platformer where you wander a post-apocalyptic city with nothing left but robots. The puzzles are engaging, the world is fascinating, and the narrative is rather interesting as well. It's actually a good game, so whether you like cats or not, Stray is a game definitely worth checking out. In a world where we haven't seen Splinter Cell or Metal Gear Solid in years, I mean, what's up with that, right? But Hitman has kind of taken up that mantle as arguably the best stealth-based series on the market right now, and Hitman 3 is pure genius in terms of its gameplay and in its level design. In Hitman 3, you're basically put in a playground where you're given a task to assassinate a target, and that's really where the fun begins because it gives you, the player, the freedom and choice to deal with each target as you see fit. There's no one set way to deal with the situation, which makes you feel like a legitimate hitman. You gotta solve the problem yourself. To put it short, Hitman 3 is a playground all about stealth and assassination. Now, in terms of just visually stunning games, one of the best looking games from an artistic standpoint is Kena Bridge of Spirits. It's actually quite amazing that this game was put together by just a small team, but we're talking about Pixar-like animations here. It's an absolutely gorgeous game with just really charming and adorable characters that capitalizes on that art style. The thing about this game, though, is that it's not just the looker. It actually kind of reminds me of a classic Zelda game. It does take place in a semi-open world that you slowly progress through as you gain new abilities. There's also some puzzles and some platforming involved, but the biggest surprise about this game is in its combat. It might look simplistic, but that's really just on a surface level because it's actually quite a challenging game that will really put your skills to the test. So, beautiful graphics, check. Great characters, check. And good gameplay, yeah, you can go and check that as well. It really has it all. Now, this next one here might not necessarily be for everybody, but the people that like this game seems to absolutely love it, and that would be Returnal. Now, the reason I say that is because it is an incredibly challenging roguelike where if you die, you have to start back from the beginning. However, if you are up for a challenge, and if you like these type of games, you'll find one of the better third-person shooters available, just period. This is a Housemarque developed game, which they just excel at making fun arcade-like games, such as Resogun, as an example. And you can really see how that expertise has translated into a big AAA shooter like this. The fast-paced gameplay, the neon lights, and it almost feels kind of like a dance as you weave, dodge, and just combine all of your different abilities. And because the mechanics are so tight and responsive, once you get the hang of it, I mean, this game just feels so good. Now, when you think about premier racing games, there's always a short list of the best, and Gran Turismo always ranks near the top. This is one of the kings of the racing genre, especially when it comes to a simulation experience. And that continues on with the latest installment, Gran Turismo 7. Now, this time they did take the franchise back to more of a traditional style that puts more emphasis on single player, going through career races, and things like earning licenses. It's gone back to its roots, which that's actually a great thing and exactly what the community wanted. Now, there has been some controversy with its payouts in the past, but just as a pure racing experience as a whole, Gran Turismo still remains king of PlayStation when it comes to the racing genre. Next up here, I have Spider-Man Miles Morales, the follow-up to Spider-Man 2018. Now, we all know how insanely fun Spider-Man 2018 was, but this game is a little smaller in scope, being about 6 or so hours long, and it's not necessarily drastically different from the 2018 game, though it doesn't really need to be. Swinging across New York City is still just as fun as ever, and this is an addition to Miles Morales' different abilities. He's not the same as Peter Parker. He does have his own thing going on. He does have access to a few extra combat options that's fun to play around with. It does also have an entertaining story, maybe a little predictable, but it has a lot of personality, and it's really just fun from beginning to end. So despite this being, yes, a smaller game, if you do like Spider-Man, then Miles Morales is definitely worth your time. And as a little bit of an added bonus here, if you get the Ultimate Edition, that does come with a native PlayStation 5 digital remaster for the 2018 Spider-Man. The Tales of series is a long-running JRPG franchise that fans of the genre knows very well. But with Tales of Arise, this is the jump that the series truly needed. Tales of Arise, much like for the previous entries, is once again an action JRPG, but this time around, Bandai Namco gave Tales of Arise more time in the oven, and it paid off in a big way here. I'd really say that Tales of Arise has quietly become one of the better AAA JRPGs available. It's got an interesting story about a slave that feels no pain, and this mixes well with the dynamics of the other characters. It's got a beautiful, timeless art style to it, and then in terms of its combat, you have to work with your team to pull off these smartly timed combos, and it's just a ton of fun to play, and that's in addition to a well-told story. Tales of Arise from top to bottom is just a good game. Now, one thing that we've seen a lot of in recent years are remakes, and one of the greatest single-player experiences ever made has now been remade for the PlayStation 5, being The Last of Us Part 1. Now, yes, there is that question on whether or not this game actually needed a remake, and okay, that's a fair question. But I will say this much. The Last of Us Part 1 made a masterpiece even better than what it already was. I mean, if you like story-driven games, I'd say that The Last of Us Part 1 is an essential experience. It's all about survival in a zombie-esque world, combined with fungi, of course, but the real draw here are the characters and how they interact with one another. It's realistic, it's relatable, and this translates right into its violent combat as well. There's a realistic and gritty approach to The Last of Us. You're not some super soldier, but instead you're a character just trying to survive in a world with a young childlike daughter that you truly find yourself caring about. The thing about the remake, though, is that because the animations and the character models have been improved, they feel even more realistic this time around, even more relatable, and that's where it truly immerses you into its world. Again, it just takes a masterpiece, and it makes it better than what it already was. Now, if you like good story-driven single-player experiences, I firmly believe that there's not too many games out there that can stand toe-to-toe with the Yakuza and Judgment series. The moment-to-moment action in these games are just so thrilling, with twists and turns around every single corner, and they tie that in nicely with its Japanese culture that bleeds atmosphere. And then it's got that over-the-top gameplay that's just a lot of fun to play around with. These really are excellent games with lots of things to do, as you can freely explore their dense cities. Now, with that said, there are two different styles of games here. So in terms of native PlayStation 5 games, you have Yakuza Like a Dragon, which is actually the 7th installment to the series, and this is a turn-based JRPG, whereas Judgment, which is a spin-off, it's got your more traditional beat-em-up gameplay, similar to the first 6 games, actually 7 games counting 0. Now, if you are new to the series, though, I would recommend playing Judgment, as it does have a completely different story and characters, but you can still technically jump into Yakuza Like a Dragon with no previous knowledge of the series. Really though, honestly, I would just recommend the entire series, because all of these games are just top-tier single-player experiences. Now, one of the more innovative games in this list is Deathloop, Really, Arcane has always kind of excelled at game design and just allowing players the freedom to play around, and that really shows in this game. This is a creative first-person shooter where you play as an assassin stuck in a death loop, hence the name of the game. In order to break the loop, though, you'll need to assassinate 8 different targets in quick succession, but if you fail, the loop then resets. That's really where the fun begins, though, as again, it gives you, the player, the creative freedom to discover the best method and the best route to take, and because of the brilliant level design and entertaining story, it's always just a pure joy to play. Now here's a unique game that I slowly just found myself liking more and more and more, and that's A Plague Tale Requiem. This is a game that fits more into that modern cinematic adventure mold, but it really sticks out to me thanks to its atmosphere, its stealth-based gameplay, and its emotionally driven story. You do play as a young girl trying to protect her sickly little brother as the two scour the rat-infested world. Now, as to the reason why there's rats kind of following you around, and why they set off on their own, I'll kind of leave that a mystery for you to find out. But just know, the story is absolutely gripping from beginning to end. Like really, by the end of this game, I was just kind of like, wow. It really does get better and better the further you get into it. And that includes with its gameplay. You do have a lot of tools at your disposal this time around, from a slingshot, you have a crossbow, among several alchemy-based additives. And you'll need to smartly manage these items to navigate around the various enemies. Now you do have the option of being completely stealth-based, or if you want to kill everyone you see, technically you can do that. The way you play in this game, though, does impact how your character grows statistically, which is that's a really interesting mechanic. I actually found myself working twice as hard not to kill people because of how your character is impacted by your gameplay decisions. It is important to note here, though, that this is a sequel to a very story-driven game, so I do recommend checking out the first game as well, being A Plague Tale Innocence. However, I mean, both of these games are excellent. The thing about the PlayStation 5 is that secretly, everybody automatically has access to one of the best games that it has to offer, and that's Astro's Playroom. This is a highly creative 3D platformer that comes pre-installed on the PlayStation 5 for free, and I absolutely urge you to play this game. In fact, I'm going to go so far as to say that I think it's an essential game for every PlayStation 5 owner to play, and that's because, first off, in my opinion, I'd actually rank this among one of the best 3D platformers to ever exist. So the game itself is amazing. It's got tight controls, it's fun to collect everything, the level design is brilliant, and it's just so charming as you kind of play through the history of PlayStation. You're going to see a lot of iconic PlayStation characters in this game, and you're going to collect PlayStation products where you can see its history. There's a real nostalgia when it comes to this game, and just a real love and care for gaming. The main reason that I think that this game is essential, though, is not just because it's fun, because yes it is, but it's also because it showcases the PlayStation 5 DualSense controller by using its technology with its gameplay. And to this day, I don't think that there's another game out there that does it better. Now, I don't typically like roguelikes all that much, where if you die, you start back from the beginning, but Hades is, this game is really just its own special breed. This game truly is a masterpiece in every sense of the word. Essentially, you play as Zagreus, the son of Hades, and he sets out to escape the underworld and his father's rule. In order to do that, Zagreus will go room to room and fight off the many enemies in his way, but if you die, you'll have to start back from the beginning. And while that might sound like a repetitive and grueling task, it never really feels that way when it comes to Hades. It's so strange to say this, but in this game, it almost feels as if you're rewarded when you die, because the story itself is just so interesting. The characters in the universe, they're so captivating. So when you die in this game, it just allows you to learn a little bit more about its world, a little bit more about its story and its characters. On top of that, each attempt to escape the underworld, it always feels different because with each room that you clear, you then have a choice of taking one of multiple paths. Each path will then reward you with an ability or an upgrade. So there's a lot of strategy that can completely change the combat as well. There's also various weapons that all feels vastly different. And seriously, I mean, you can easily sink 50 plus or even 100 plus hours into Hades, and it will still be insanely fun. So from a story perspective, to its characters, to just its overall gameplay, Hades, without a shadow of doubt, is a masterpiece that you need to play. Now, Ratchet & Clank has always been an insanely fun series, and Rift Apart easily continues on with that trend. Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart combines its action platforming that it's just so well known for, those over-the-top creative weapons, it's got stunning visuals, and once again, it has strong characters with a lot of personality. Actually, I was very happy with the story this time around. It does introduce some new characters that you can play as, and they fit into the universe and into its story just perfectly, while also adding a little bit more depth to it. The thing about Rift Apart, though, is that it just knows how to be a fun game. Every weapon in this game, I mean, they're just so crazy, and it really begs you, the player, to wreak as much havoc and have as much fun as you possibly can. I'd also say that there's a little technical genius in this game as well. I mean, it's clear that this is a beautiful game, but Insomniac Games also try to take advantage of the PlayStation 5 solid-state drive, allowing you to jump rift to rift without any slowdown whatsoever, and that meshes into its gameplay and really just gives you an extra little ability, while also really showing the power of the PlayStation 5's solid-state drive. In recent years, Resident Evil has come back in a pretty major way, and that's not only in the form of remakes, but also with their completely new games as well, like Resident Evil Village Gold, which now has 2 campaigns including its Winters expansion. In the main campaign, you play as Ethan Winters trying to find his daughter and must fight off the likes of werewolves, you fight off vampires, among other terrifying creatures to do so. It really mixes in a good amount of horror alongside its action gameplay, kind of giving you the best of both worlds. But thanks to its smart level design and the way the world interconnects, it's a slow tear that just kind of builds up as you explore each new locale. The thing about Resident Evil Village, though, is that it was already good with memorable villains and everything that you'd expect from the franchise. But the Gold Edition did add value by including a new third-person camera option, similar to the Resident Evil remakes in case you prefer that over first-person. Then on top of that, you also get the Winters expansion that has you play as an entirely different character and a new campaign that also plays quite a bit different. Now, I won't explain why for spoiler-related reasons, but Resident Evil Village Gold is a must-own for fans of the series, or really just for fans of the horror genre in general. Alright, so next up here I have It Takes Two, which might actually be the most creative game that I've played in my entire life. Now that's no exaggeration either. It's absolutely brilliant how every single level in this game continuously changes up in terms of gameplay and in its design. So yes, this is a mandatory cooperative game, but do not let that stop you. It does in fact come with a free friend pass, so you can actually have anybody join you online without the need for them to purchase the game themselves as well. And you are absolutely going to want to experience this one. First off, the story is well done and it's highly amusing. You play as this troubled married couple turned to dolls, and the only way to get back to normal is to work together. Now this is done in a number of different ways. In one level, you might have to fly a pieced-together airplane trying to escape killer squirrels out of all things, where in another level, it might play more like a third-person shooter. On the surface, this game might just look like a 3D platformer, but there is so much more happening with this game, and I'm just going to go out on a limb here and say that this might actually be the best cooperative game of all time. Yes, It Takes Two really is that good. And here I have the game that kicked off the Soulsborne genre, Demon's Souls. Now this game did originally release back on the PlayStation 3, but this is actually one of my own personal favorite remakes thus far. It looks absolutely stunning on a PlayStation 5, and I'd say it's a real good early showcase on what the console is capable of. Being a Soulsborne game, though, of course, you can expect it to be challenging, especially when it comes to its boss encounters. By the way, they're brilliant, and it's got that precise combat. But something that's always really stood out to me about this game is its level design. Unlike other FromSoft games, Demon's Souls has each world split up by interacting with different monuments. Now you can freely visit each location in mostly any order that you want, but it is a more linear style of game. But because of that, each world, they feel so tightly crafted. They're atmospheric, they're well designed, and when you combine that with its just fantastic visuals on the PlayStation 5 and top-notch combat, it really makes for a superb experience. And now here we are in the top 3, and these are all defining experiences for the PlayStation 5 so far this generation. And that starts off with Horizon Forbidden West. Now I've always loved the setting of Horizon, the first game Zero Dawn, and now with Forbidden West. The worlds in these games are probably just some of the most memorable in any game, combining futuristic dinosaur-like robots with this more prehistoric setting. It's unique and it just really stands out. It's also frankly just stunning. And to me, it's quite amazing that this game is open world, because you look at its visuals and it's just like, wow, how did they manage to make an open world game look this good? But Horizon Forbidden West, it took what Horizon Zero Dawn did, and then they just improved upon everything. The world is massive in this game, the combat is even better, and then what really impressed me the most was its story. I thought the story, and for that matter, its side missions, was a big step up compared to Horizon Zero Dawn. Now, I will say the story takes a little while to get going. Aloy is a little hard-headed early on, but once it gets going, it never lets up from there. Now here I have the much anticipated, the much awaited God of War Ragnarok. And let me tell you, the wait was well worth it. Dad of War is back with his son Atreus, or boy, depending on how you remember him, but this time the story and gameplay is much expanded. The world is bigger, and with more characters entering the fold this time around, it just feels more alive. There's also a real connection between the characters that makes it feel very authentic. Of course, much like other games, characters will talk as they take their journeys together. But in Ragnarok, they're also not afraid to slow the game down to give these characters a more peaceful setting to talk with each other. And I felt that made the story even more relatable. Now, outside of its story, though, God of War, it also just once again excels with its hack and slash gameplay. It's always been known as one of the best within its genre, and there's a real good reason for that. It almost feels like you're fighting in a rhythm. You have different weapons, you have companion abilities, and as you learn new combos and abilities, putting all of that together, it's just so satisfying, especially when you're playing on harder difficulties where you're really gonna need to master your combos. Now, I've always described God of War 2018 as one of the most perfect single-player experiences. And well, Ragnarok continues that perfect single-player experience. And at the number one spot, the game that just truly blew me away is none other than Elden Ring. This game is truly just so masterful in what it does. Elden Ring is a brutally challenging action RPG. It kind of reminds me of an older 90s game, but thrown into more of a modern package with more advanced gameplay. It's kind of like an alternate history in the sense that what if games would have continued in that direction, where they don't hold your hands, where they reward you for investigating its world with its many secrets. You're going to find optional bosses and hidden but powerful weapons, and you can uncover more layers to its story by piecing its world and items together. And then to just top everything off, you just have that addictive and challenging gameplay. Of course, this is a From Software game, so you expect that challenging gameplay, but even then, I'd still put Elden Ring right at the top of FromSoft's best work ever, and that's already an achievement because pretty much all of the Soulsborne games are great. We just talked about that earlier with Demon Souls. I think one of the best parts about this game, though, is not just with its world that George R.R. Martin helped create, but also in how much player choice is involved with its gameplay. There's a lot of different builds in this game thanks to its many weapons and abilities that allows you to choose what type of combat best fits you. And that's going to be important considering some of its very challenging bosses, to say the least. Now, in terms of story, I do want to kind of highlight this as well, because if you truly do pay attention and put its world together, it actually does have a very good story as well. No, it's not as forthcoming, but it is still there, and it is absolutely excellent. Elden Ring, though, it's not just a masterpiece, but I'm just going to go and say it's one of the best games that I've ever played. At the very least, it's one of my own personal favorite games ever made. Anyways, though, that's it for this list, but hopefully you found something here that you can enjoy yourself. And if I did forget any of your favorites, do let me know in the comments below. That way we can all just kind of discover those games together as well. With that said, though, if you liked the video, don't forget to hit that bell notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.